Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking your interface designs from just, functional to absolutely super pro. We're skipping the absolute basics to uncover the advanced styling techniques that top-tier designers use to create interfaces that don't just look good, but literally feel alive. So, if you want to elevate those UI and UX skills to the next professional level, you're in exactly the right place.
We've broken this explainer down into 5 main areas: the language of interfaces, pro typography hacks, perfecting dark mode, advanced component states, and finally, the power of micro-interactions. Let's get right into it.
Part 1. The language of interfaces. It's all about establishing hierarchy and signifiers.
Okay, so it's kind of fascinating how affordance actually works in design, right? Users intuitively know how things work through visual signifiers. Think about it. A hover state, a highlight on an active nav item, or graying out inactive text. These literally tell the user exactly what they can and can't do. If your UI affords the action properly, you shouldn't have to write out a manual. It's like this unspoken, silent dialogue between your user and the screen.
Moving on to Part 2, Pro Typography Hacks. This is the math behind the polish. Now this is a brilliant insider secret. You know how default, unstyled text often feels just a little too loose, kind of amateurish? Well, scratch that. By simply tightening your letter spacing by -2 to 3% and dropping that line height to around 110 to 120%, it instantly makes larger header text look incredibly pro. Seriously, it's a tiny mathematical tweak, but the visual impact is massive.
And hey, speaking of math, we gotta talk grids. Look, strict 12-column grids aren't always necessary for every single custom landing page, but the 4-point grid system, that is an absolute must-use standard. Why 4? Because literally everything is a multiple that can easily be split right in half. It doesn't just look inherently better, it creates this mathematically sound, consistent breathing room in your whitespace across the whole design.
So the real takeaway about typography hierarchy is that context completely dictates your scale. If you're building a standard landing page, you generally don't want more than 6 different font sizes. But designing a dashboard, that's a whole different ballgame. Dashboards require extreme information density, meaning you're almost never going to use texts larger than 24 pixels. The environment literally changes the rules.
Okay, let's talk icons. Because when working with icons next to text, a lot of folks make them way too big. But check out this simple hack to get it flawless every time. First, find your font's exact line height. Say it's 24 pixels. Second, set the icon to exactly that same 24 pixel size. And finally, tighten up the text spacing. Boom, perfect, seamless alignment every single time.
All right, Part 3. Perfecting dark mode. How we get depth without shadows. Before we even touch dark mode depth, we need to establish semantic colors. These absolutely aren't just colors you pick because, they look pretty. You have to let the color find you based on its embedded meaning and the specific purpose it serves in guiding the user. You apply these rapidly to create instant psychological signifiers. For example, blue inherently signals trust for a primary button, right? While red screams danger or urgency for an error state. Yellow warns them, and green confirms success, like a brand new confirmation chip. You're basically anchoring the entire experience in clear, undeniable visual meaning. Always use color for a purpose.
But here is the massive challenge. How on earth do you pull off interface depth when a black shadow completely disappears against a dark background? In light mode, sure, just drop a shadow behind a card. But in dark mode, that tool is totally off the table.
So what's the answer? It's elevating brightness. To create depth in dark mode, you actually make the card slightly lighter than the background itself. And here's the crucial part. You must dial down the saturation and brightness of your colorful chips. If you leave them at their light mode brightness, they're going to blow out your contrast hierarchy and literally strain the user's eyes. It's all about subtle, controlled elevation.
Now, flipping back to light mode for just a second. Shadows are your ultimate depth tool there, but as this quote brilliantly points out, if the shadow is the first thing you notice on a design, you're not using it right. Amateurs use these harsh, dark shadows. The pros, we dial up the blur drastically and knock way down on the opacity so the shadow feels natural, soft, and completely subliminal.
Moving right along to Part 4, Advanced Component States. Designing every interaction.
This brings us to the absolute golden rule of interactive design. Every single interaction needs a response. Honestly, whether it's a click, a scroll, a swipe, or some data fetching in the background, the interface has to actively answer the user back. Dead silence from a UI?
It's incredibly frustrating.
So, what does that response actually look like in practice? Well, if you're building a button, it can't just be a static rectangle. It systematically requires at least 4 states: default, hovered, active or pressed, and disabled. Oh, and sometimes you'll even need a 5th loading state with a little spinner. And hey, it doesn't stop at buttons. Input fields need specific focus states when clicked, error states with red borders if something's wrong, and warning states too.
And here is a fantastic, super fast math trick for those secondary actions. When you strip away the background to make what's called a ghost button, just use this rule for perfect padding. Simply double the height to determine the width. That's it. It keeps your proportions mathematically perfect and gives you a flawless standalone button, whether there's an icon in there or not.
And finally, Part 5, the power of micro-interactions. This is that final professional polish. Micro-interactions are what take basic feedback and really step it up a notch. Imagine a copy button. It might change color when clicked, but are you totally sure it copied? A micro-interaction is that subtle animation, like a tiny green chip smoothly sliding up from the bottom of the screen to explicitly confirm, yep, copied to clipboard. It's that tiny detail that elevates the experience from just good to truly exceptional.
And for a final styling touch, let's talk overlays. If you just slap a basic, flat, full-screen color over an image to make text readable, you kind of ruin the image, right? Instead, try using a progressive blur layered over a linear gradient. This smoothly converts the image into a perfectly readable background while keeping the top half of the photo absolutely beautiful and modern. It is such an incredibly high-end look.
Well, we've definitely covered a lot of ground today, from typography math to dark mode depth. So I want to leave you with a question about your own work. Are your designs just statically communicating, or are they actively responding? Are you just dropping pixels onto a grid, or are you actually using these advanced styling hacks to craft a living, breathing interface that instantly and beautifully reacts to your users? Keep that in mind the very next time you open up your design software.